you need to give your name and your street address, and you need to keep to the item that's just been moved, the budget. So nothing extraneous to that. We have a lot of people who want to speak. I reserve the right to kind of limit. We have a lot of people who want to speak. I reserve the right to limit us to perhaps 3 minutes each.
Get the leveler, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Elizabeth Wolf, and I reside on Flanders Woods Lane. I am representing tonight the Coventry Democratic Town Committee and will address 2 items on their behalf.
You can only do the school.
Okay, the budget, all right. Excuse me. All right. This budget, which was adopted by the Town Council in June, has only a 0.8 mil increase because many projects and programs from both the town and education budgets were cut. The largest cuts by far came from the Board of Ed budget, as we just heard. This despite the many citizens, mostly parents and staff, that came before the council to ask that the programs and the staff be maintained. In the spirit of bipartisanship, however, our Democratic Town Committee voted unanimously at its regular meeting this past Tuesday, November 14th, to support the budget put forward by the previous Republican-controlled Town Council. The Democratic Town Committee agreed that although many reductions were painful, the Republican council members worked very hard to maintain services. And so we definitely are asking everyone to vote yes on this budget. Thank you. I can't get
You can
it.
just hand it to the next. Just hand it to the next person.
Oh, okay.
I'm Christine Patsy. I live at 98 Brookline Road. I'm a retired public health statistician and reading tutor, currently on the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Plan of Conservation and Development, Housing and Economic Development discussions. I'm here to talk about how education won the election, how housing has become the engine for growth in the grand list, and why the budget and the library referendum should be supported by Coventry voters of all ages. Those test scores that were announced over the summer, putting us right up there against Mansfield and all those professors' children, were exciting. Yet, just 15 years ago, we were dragging the bottom of those DRGs, and there was a time when the high school wasn't going to be recertified. So, what happened? A bipartisan group got together and worked on education. And from start to finish, the education discussions have been bipartisan. Given that 2/3 of the town budget is for education, it's not surprising there would be vigorous discussions between the Board of Education and the town council. But past town council meetings, there's been a lot of unseemly bickering, some personal stuff, and they were not pleasant. Many town council members were self-made small businessmen, but schools are a multifaceted big business. Council members were concerned with building expenditures, but the board looks at which instructional programs result in the highest test scores for kids. From looking at the data, not only education but housing, it's clear that the large increase that has taken place over the past decade in Coventry is related to housing. Sewering around the lake allowed much bigger houses to be built on small beach cottage footprints. Although subdivision activity has fallen off since the Great Recession, There's been steady construction of upscale single-family homes. As everybody knows, before a family moves to a town, they look at the school scores. 20 years ago, I was part of a co-housing group. There's lots of land in Coventry, but we chose not to even look here because your school scores were so low. However, what we've got is lots of building. Families are moving into the new high-end homes in Coventry because they want their kids to go to good schools. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out that the election was won by the party that was most explicit and detailed in their support for education.
Hello, I'm Michael Hicks from 968 Pucker Street, Coventry. I first would like to thank the outgoing town council for their great work and a fiscally responsible budget. And I'd also like to welcome the new town council. I look forward to your ongoing deliberations and hopefully bipartisan work in the upcoming years. I just have one other thing. I commend Dr. Petrone and the Board of Education for those test scores. It's something to really hang your head on, and I appreciate that, having a child of my own in the school system. I just have two quick questions. I'm certainly glad, as well as many of you are, that we finally have a state budget. My question is, does the new 2-year state budget solve Coventry's state revenue issues for this year and years beyond this? It's my understanding that the state budget was passed because they made agreements with several unions that would last up to 10 years or beyond. So my worry is that next year, the year after, when they can't cut unions, that we will unfortunately bear some of the burden of that shortcoming in the state budget. My second question is, besides the $5.4 million library project, are there any other projects on the horizon that will require bonding with the town? I understand there may be 1 or 2 school projects that will be requiring bonding, and I'm just curious why those weren't discussed, and if so, what those bonding numbers will be, because that will certainly impact us as voters. Thank you.
I'll answer the 2 questions. I think I'm loud-mouthed enough. First off, did the state budget solve the state's problem? I already mentioned no. Nobody knows where that's going to go, but we need to start from a position of strength, because that gives us the ability to adjust as we go forward. But I don't think anyone in this room believes the state budget problems are over, or that they'll be over in the near future. We're going to have to continue to be smart and come up with new ideas and new ways to move forward. In terms of the capital improvement plans going forward, in the back of the yellow budget book that's available on a table, the capital improvement plan is included in that. Actually, there's a vote by the town meeting coming up later on after we get through this discussion stage to approve that plan. But there are several projects in the early concept stage, some of which don't really have price tags. But coming forward, there's going to be other borrowings that are going to be asked for, and the community will then have to have a decision on it. And they go down for a list of a couple bridges that are coming along, whether we get grants for those or not, and what the price tag, so we can't tell you how much that will be. There's some school projects, specifically some ADA and school code projects for this complex here. Some of that we'll be getting some state aid for the code portions of that, and there's a building committee. Those projects are detailed in the capital budget. The timing of that is not clear yet, and the last council was talking about maybe looking at it this coming spring. But again, no debt service would be in the upcoming budget. This council, the new council, has been in office for very brief time, and we haven't even had a chance to go over any of those projects. We also have a building committee looking at some issues related to some of the constructions in this building. We're far from even having an estimate of what that would be or what the impact is. I believe you're on that building committee, and you know that we're meeting in December to talk further about what the next step is. This building also has a section, the older section over here, that new roof's coming up. So all those are ongoing issues, and I believe that at some point we're going to have to go back and look at some road issues too. So yes, there will be some future borrowings that are going to be requested.
Matt O'Brien, 98 Timber Trail. John, I think that the new budget actually has some provisions in it for the governor to cut further from municipalities. And I think they also just announced recently that we're already in deficit. Maybe you can just share those numbers with us.
Yeah, I mentioned that already, but that budget cuts are coming. But they did do a $20 million authorization for the governor to cut municipal aid. Otherwise, the governor can't cut municipal aid. And they are already talking about the deficit that you saw in the paper that's been announced with the consensus budget estimates. So there are cuts coming. I'm not hiding that. And that's where, again, if we cut too deep, then we don't have any room to adjust. And we'll have to start laying people off. And when we lay people off, by the way, as we know, you pay unemployment insurance. So you pay 66% of their salary, depending on their salary range, and you get nothing for it. So it's not the best way to do it. And the disruption that Superintendent Patron talked about is immense, because people bump other people that have less seniority. And you sometimes break up a good working team within your organization because people have the right to move. So we're in for a tough future, there's no doubt about it. On the other hand, when you look at borrowing rates, rates are unusually low and have remained unusually low. So it's a good time still to do construction. Otherwise, a lot of those projects aren't going away. At some point, somebody will knock on our door and say, you have to do them, or you're in violation of ADA or some other issue.
Someone else like to speak, ask a question? And please go to the mic so that folks at home can hear you. Anyone else? Please state your name and address.
My name is Robin Gallagher, and I live at 984 Main Street. And I just thought I could provide an interesting perspective. In order to better fund things in the town, we need to grow the grand list. To do that, we need to bring in young families. I'm one of those families. We moved to Coventry in 2014. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when I looked at homes, I looked in Tolland. I grew up in Mansfield, and I looked in Mansfield to see what the best option was in terms of schools. I was familiar, having gone to E.O. Smith, with Coventry's reputation in 2003 when I graduated, and it wasn't good. So Coventry wasn't a big option for us, but we looked, we talked, and we were impressed with what the schools had done. I think to keep families like us in town, the schools have to maintain that level of performance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak, ask a question? Pursuant to Section 9-3E of the Town Charter, any resolution of the town authorizing the issuance of bonds or notes of $100,000 or more after the approval of the Town Council must be voted on at a referendum to be held at an adjourned town meeting and to be held in conjunction with the next regular election as adjourned by the Town Council. This meeting will continue for the purposes of discussion on the proposed resolution. There will be a brief presentation by the Booth and Zinnick Library Committee, Building Committee on the process and the project proposed. I'm calling on Tim Timberman, chair of that committee, to introduce his committee and the architectural firm.
of the Booth-and-Dimick Library Expansion Committee, and I'm pleased to be here. I would like to introduce the other members of the Library Expansion Committee. We have Sandra Asper-Stave, we have Kathy Ryan, and we have Bill Boney. This has been a long process. I'd like to thank the past town councils that that formed this subcommittee. I'd like to thank the former council for bringing this issue to this town meeting, and I'd like to thank the current commission for their council for their future support. Let's go to the next slide. There's this has been a very long, this started back in 2012. The library formed an expansion committee looking at space needs. We used the state library format to determine that space needs, and going through that, we determined in 2013 that we needed 24,000 square feet for the entire facility, which means that we needed an additional 12,000. We brought those findings to the town council in 2015, and they formed the library expansion committee that is here today to present this to you. Subsequently, with that formation by the town council, we had various meetings with the finance committee, with the steering committee, with planning and zoning, with the Water Pollution Control Authority. We've also met with the State Historic Preservation Office, and on November 2nd of 2017, a few weeks ago, the town council voted to forward the library expansion project to this town meeting. So that's why we're here. So the library usage, why do we need to be bigger? Well, when the library was, the old library, as you see, the old brick and mortar building, was expanded in 1989. At that time, that went to referendum a number of times. Each time it failed a number of times, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller. So it really didn't meet the needs even when we expanded it in 1989. Subsequently, with the space needs report and such, we found that we need bigger space. Why? Right now, we're at a point now where when we bring a new book into the library, we have to select an older book and it goes out. So our inventory of books cannot increase. We're stagnant. Another reason we need to expand is that the meeting room we have in the basement in the children's area is very inadequate for size and for activities that we have multiple activities. It's used for children, it's used for adults, it's used for teens, and it's very inefficient. And it doesn't have access to the outside so that we could, other community groups could utilize that large area for meeting. Another is that we have one of the big upsurge in usage in the library is we have about a 9-fold increase in the usage in teens. We have hundreds of teens coming to our not at the same time, but to our facility. So, and we also act for all the citizens of this town. We have, of the citizens we have, I think one of the slides before showed it about, we have 8,024 residents have library cards. That's 64%. I mean, The Board of Education doesn't have 64 percent members. So we have a big core of the population that comes to our library, that uses our facilities, and we're just not a library is just not about books. It's, you come to our library now, we have books, we have great books. We're a video store. We have tons of DVDs. We have music. We have programs. We work with seniors, we work with teens, and we work with the various agencies in the town. We have an outreach to all of our public schools. So there's a large usage in our community. Last year we had 67,000 visitors to the library, which was counted by the door as people came in and out. That is a 17% increase from the year before, and this graphic here kind of shows that increase over that time period. Also, we have when we're compared for library usage compared to the average statewide or for the average towns in the area of the population, we're 30%. Average towns in the area is only about 25%, and the average statewide is 38%. Those are visits per service hour. So we're a greatly used library. Let's go next. Current building. Current building has challenges. It's old. The codes change. We have fire code, we have building code, we have ADA code. We have over the years experienced leakage in various parts of the building, the new building, the old building. There's molds, there's gutter problems, there's insufficient meeting space, there's a lack of quiet spaces. Even though we welcome lots of people to the library, the children's place, it's not a real quiet space. In the teen area where the teens are, can't expect them to be quiet, but, and we have outdated wiring, we have outdated building codes, we have no vision protect, we're totally maxed out as far as the vision for technology growth. If you've been to our library, you'll see a big bank of computers. You'll see that people free can have access to our computers. In fact, you can see many people who come into the library, they'll have their laptops, they'll have their phones. We have Wi-Fi. They have access to the internet. And so when we have hurricanes and we have power outages, usually Main Street has power and people use the library to charge up their devices to and utilize the technology we have. And also one big thing is when we do have a large, very popular program, there's inadequate parking. So when we started looking, what the charge from the town council to us was to look at what we can do to expand, not necessarily on the site itself, but also to investigate other sites. So what we did was we looked at what it would cost to relocate the library, and this is a cost analysis that so to see that if we were going to relocate off-site, it would cost us a little over $90 million. We then said, well, what would it cost to renovate the existing library? And so we hired an architectural firm. We hired DRA, and they have developed with us very intimately. We spent many meetings trying to scale the project down to something that was workable, something that was efficient, and that was cost effective. And with me today is representative, it's Angela Cahill from DRA.
Thank you, Tim. So, my name's Angela Cahill. I'm an architect. I'm a senior project manager at Drumming Rosane Anderson. We were hired in 2015 to look at the space needs for your library. And as Tim mentioned, the space needs were in line with what the state requires and asks for library projects. What they do is take your population, and there's formulas that then produce, how many materials you're supposed to have in your library, as well as how much space you need and how many seats you need to service your population. So the 24,000 square feet was on target, and we were hired to look at that. So initially in 2015, we came up with a solution that met those needs, the 24,000 square feet. It was a little bit higher cost than what the committee felt would be reasonable for your community. So they asked to see if we could find some space savings. We came up with a plan that was slightly less, around more like 21,000 square feet, and we still met the program needs. We still need to meet the program needs because we applied for a grant at the state. And the state gives only 3 $1 million grants per year. And Coventry was awarded that grant by the state, so we're very honored to have that grant accepted. And the reason that the state was okay with the space reduction is that we were able to find ways in which we could share spaces between uses at your library. So as you see the images here, the other thing we wanted to do was make sure that your addition to your library would be in keeping with the historic building. So their materials, both a cementitious siding, a no maintenance siding, and brick would be very much complementary to your historic building on the south side, on the Main Street side. On the north side, which would be on the parking lot side, would use more of that siding material, which would be in keeping with other buildings in your town center, to be able to reflect your community appropriately and provide an accessible entrance on the parking lot side, as well as entry, if you see on the left-hand side of that bottom image, a direct entrance to a program room that could be used after hours instead of needing to open the entire library in order to have a program. In the next slide, you'll see a massing, what we call a massing diagram, to show that the addition is not only in keeping in materials, but in keeping in scale. We did not want to overpower that historic building and let that historic building be in front. And SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, which is part of your grant approval, commented on how they appreciated that we kept the addition back behind and not right up front with the historic building. And they look very carefully at our detailing as well. And you'll see here in this image as well the expanded parking. The other big change that we've decided to make in order to really facilitate the addition on your east side is to move the drive back to the west side. Some of you may not know that's where it originally was in the first place, and that will be able to accommodate this addition on the east side. This shows the what is the upper floor plan, which is really your ground level plan on both the historic entrance and the parking lot side. And so you could enter from either, but most people will be parking in the rear and coming in on that north side. And what we want to point out here is here's your new large program space here on the northeast corner that again can be opened and just be opened while the library is closed. The circulation desk would be moved to a central location to be able to monitor visitors coming, patrons coming from either the north or south entrance. And then I want to point out that it's very clear the definition between the existing library and the new addition. Because the other way we were able to save costs is that this new addition will be built and have a firewall in between the existing building and the new, so that you can still be within your existing building while the new addition is built, saving on phasing costs. You won't have to move out and rent a space for the library. You can still operate. But also, by keeping the addition square footage small, we'll be able to provide an addition that does not need an automatic fire suppression system. And we believe we'll be able to, per code, build this addition with wood frame construction. So that keeps your cost per square footage down. And it also keeps both areas safe from each other and is in line with the codes. Also want to point out another part of the addition is this, it's called large print and periodicals, but really that's the nice quiet reading room that would be added to the building. The remainder of the existing building on this main level would be given over to the adult collection, both digital and hard materials. And your front historic building, which is on that lower left, would be renovated for some very quaint reading spaces. The lower level floor plan is quite similar. Again, you can see the firewall between the existing and new. We would maintain, again, in a cost savings measure, maintain the existing stair that you use to get down to the children's room, and also maintain the elevator. This would be renovated, but maintained. That saves a lot of money. So here on the lower level is really, majority is given over to your youth. And we'll start with the addition has the younger kids. They have their own children's librarian circulation desk in the center of the room that can monitor folks coming down either stair. And then the young adults will actually be given the old program room, which they use now, but this will now be exclusively for them, and they do have a youth services librarian desk right outside that room. And this really is in line with what we're seeing at all the other libraries within the state and New England, is providing this space for the teens to go. They need it, they're going to use it. We also have a small children's program room on the lower level as well, so you're not doubling up programs. There are so many programs at the library that you really need both spaces. And then in the center there would be digital materials and computer desks, again with staff centrally located.
Makerspace.
Oh, sorry, yes. So the makerspace on this level at the bottom of the existing stair, really is not just for the kids. It was a great place to put it, but obviously that will be open for all kinds of great activities and materials. We looked at the very specific activities that happen in your library, which are exciting, and so those we can see will be heavily used in the makerspace.
Thank you, Angel. So in our deliberations and working with DRA, we came up with, originally we had 24,000, which was an increase of 12,000. We brought that down to 8,000, so we reduced that to a total of 20,000 square feet, and that cost reduction was about $1.2 million. As Angela pointed out, we separated, we kept the old library pretty much where it was with the old 1989 edition, and we utilized that wall as a firewall, and we were able to expand that. We don't need a sprinkler system for fire suppression. We don't have adequate water pressure in the village. It also remained, that methodology allows the library to remain open during construction. There's no need to rent temporary space, no need to store collection off-site as we did when we renovated 89. We used to, over on Daly Road, where next to the penalty box, that's where the library was, and some storage was in trailers. So we're going to keep the library open during this construction. There'll probably be some closures sometimes, and basically biggest ones when we make the transition. Okay. Another savings, we reused the existing elevator rather than rebuilding it. So we're going to renovate that. We're going to use wood construction. And we're going to cover it also with low maintenance siding. That had savings about $500,000. There's no need to acquire new land. Minimal site work is needed to use parts of the existing parking lot to build the expanded lot. Right now, we can have 40 parking spaces on site. We're going to be expanding it, realigning it, and we will have 76 parking spaces. And by putting the driveway from where it is now to the north or the west side, however you want to look, when you're looking at the library, it will be on your left, where the old entrance was. We're allowed to expand on that side where the present driveway is. So the total cost reductions that we saw was the reduction of the addition, saved about 1.2 million, fire suppression, 400,000, the elevator renovation saved another 100,000, the siding and such another 100,000, using frame wood construction saved about 300,000. The savings from not closing the library down, moving books and furnishings 10,000, storage rental 5,000, and having a temporary library rental at some other facility is another $40,000. So in all that comes up with a savings of about $2.1 million. So the planned facility will resolve outstanding CIP expenditures, which needs to be addressed. And these are the items. These are items that are on the CIP that if we renovate, if we expand, we don't have to do these because these will be included into the expansion. Right now, $75,000 per chiller, a boiler, in-ground tank we have outside that we have to remove, chimney liner replacement, carpeting, painting, elevator upgrades, roof, windows, efficiency lighting, expanded parking, all in all total another $427,000. So the project design reduction totaled about $2,155,000. The CIP cost avoidance was $427,000. So total proposed savings basically is $2,582,600. So, what's this new library cost us? Construction costs came down a little bit under, and first we had a little estimate back in November of 2015. We had a number of meetings with the council finance committee, and with their suggestions, we incorporated many of those for cost savings, and so we were able to get the construction costs reduced by about $800,000. So now it's about $400,000. Demolition is going to be about the same. The site work, we were able to reduce the site work with change of type of retaining walls, and the building. So, and the building construction was about $3.5 million. So you add it up. So that's the 3.9. Then there's other items that you have to factor in: escalation, contingency, general conditions, bonds, insurance, etc. So total construction costs were now at $4,690,592. Then we have soft costs. They're there. They have to be there.
Going beyond that, though, the question really becomes, do we need this? And a couple of quick questions for, where was the gentleman that gave the speech? 60-some-odd% of the town's got library cards, right? Do we have a number of, like, out of that 60-some-odd%, how many people use them? Or how frequently they use them?
If I may, I'm Christy Sadowski, I'm the library director.
Yeah.
We don't keep track of how many people use it per month or per week, but what we do know is that our library cards expire every 3 years, and you will not be part of that 67% if your library card is expired. So you have been in the library to renew it, whether it's to use our digital resources or to borrow items from the library within those 3 years. And we do not require a library card to use resources within the library, which means that many of the people who use the computers or come in to read during the day or attend the programs could be Coventry residents without cards as well. So the number could go.
Okay, do we know how many, like, with the number of transactions and whatnot, do we know like how many, how many items are processed per, like an average per transaction kind of thing?
We know how many go out per month. If you wanted, we could break it down a little bit lower than that, like by week or something, but because of the nature of people coming up and, well, I'm going to take this today, or I'm going to take this the next day, or I'm going to take 20 books right now and not come back for 3 weeks, which does definitely happen with the children's room particularly, can get up there closer to 100 at a time. So it varies, someone could come every day and take one thing, or once a week and take one thing, or once a week and take 50. It's very dependent.
I mean, my thing is just kind of like the number of library cards issued in town is not really a great metric to benchmark how busy something is. I'm not saying that the library's not busy. Don't kill me for it. But what I'm saying is it's a terrible way to benchmark it, I mean, there's, like, if 60% of the town's people have library cards, do 40% use them? Do 20% use them? Is there one guy that's reading like 100,000 books a year and he's just like super smart? Like, it's a really kind of not a great metric.
It's a broad community. What I can show you here, this is from fiscal year 2016. It's a chart of the circulation per service hour. So that's for every item, or for every hour we're open, how many items we circulate compared to the average of towns in similar size and compared to statewide. So we're right there in the middle, above normal, or above towns of the same size.
So I mean, yeah, we definitely, we're definitely a little busier.
Yeah, and that shows how many per hour.
Right. I'm just saying that it's not a great metric for the amount of traffic that we actually seem to see. Not that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that it's not a real great way to measure it. And maybe that's something that we should kind of look at before we spend $5.5 million. Again, like the number of transactions, obviously we don't really believe that somebody's checking out 100,000 books a year, right? I mean, I don't know. I would like to be able to read that much, but I can't. But we don't really have any way to benchmark that. So, maybe that's another thing that we really kind of got to know to really decide how busy is the library. The library is definitely busier than the size that it is now allows. Do we need a $5.5 million giant library? I'm not sold on it. I like some of the ideas. Again, the library does great, just fantastic things. The kids programs and stuff like that, they're great. Could we do something different? Maybe. Do we have anything that kind of pertains to if we build it, do we know what it's going to cost to fill it, staff it, heat it, like electricity, stuff like that?
Sorry, I went to see if our annual report had any statistics for you. In terms of staffing it, for safety's sake, we would feel that with a building that size, we would want 2 people upstairs during all open hours and 2 people downstairs. In order to accomplish that, we think we would need 2 part-time people, less than 1 full-time position, and that would keep the building safe and fully staffed at all times for the size of it. Regarding electricity costs, we do know it's a bigger building. Obviously, it's going to cost a bit more, but we also know that our boiler, our chiller, everything is very out of date, inefficient. There was an energy committee a few years ago that included us in a study that pointed out the inefficiencies of those, and we're expecting quite a bit in savings in updating them to something more efficient.
So 2 part-time staff, what are we looking at dollars-wise? Do we know about what that costs? Do we pay a minimum wage? Or
we pay just slightly over minimum.
Okay.
And that's usually for someone with either a college degree or a master's degree.
But as far as the utility costs and the maintenance costs and stuff, we really don't know. And we really can't know. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to beat you up. There you go.
Tim Timberman, 1194 Main Street. When we're making the addition is going to be made so that whatever utilities we're using, yes, we're going to be using a little more electricity, but what we're going to be putting in the library is going to be more energy efficient. Right now we have boilers, we have chillers that are ancient and need replacement. So whatever we put in there, we will be saving from what we're paying now. If it's going to be a break even, I can't tell you that, okay? Now, in our annual report of the Booth Dimick Library, it does have the circulation items and what you were asking about. So, for items of last year, items borrowed is 60,000 print books, 3,000 print magazines, 15,000 videos, 4,000 audio books and music CDs, 313 museum passes. By department, we had 34,000 items of the adult collection were used. Almost 5,000 items from the teen collection. 42,500 items from the children's section. 4,000 miscellaneous items. Digital loans, we have 3,300 ebooks, 2,073 audiobooks, 490 digital magazines, and 18 digital movies. Those are online. Those aren't the DVDs that we lend out.
These, like I said, I don't think there's any doubt, really, not to me.
Well, you asked, so I'm just giving you the numbers.
What I'm saying is, those are the numbers, it's the same idea. It doesn't, obviously, things are going out the door. We get it. I get it. I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't think that anybody thinks that the library's not busier than normal. I mean, the numbers pretty much show that we are busier than your typical library of its sort in a town of our sort, right? But that doesn't tell me the traffic level. Do we know, like, too, with the traffic level, is there anything that shows us, like, are there certain times of year? I mean, like, when the kids are off in the summer, it's busier, I would guess, right? Like, that's got to be a prime time kind
Mr.
of thing?
Moderator, it's 9:20. Could you please wrap up your questions?
I'm interested in what he's saying.
Yes, ma'am, that's the point of a town hall in New England.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of, I
I
don't know, I mean, we're kind of talking here, like, I don't know.
Okay, your turn.
So anyway, like I said, is there I mean, there's got to be a prime time, right? Like when the kids are home in the summer, we're busy in the summer, right?
Summer is definitely the busiest season. Does not mean that we are not busy the rest of the year.
Right, yeah, totally.
And it's staffed accordingly also.
Right. I mean, like, for what we have now, I'm sure we're doing everything we can to try to accommodate the traffic that comes in there. But it is, like, summer's the busiest time. How does that relate to the rest of the year? So if we drop 8,000 square feet onto the library, right? And we can better handle the summer traffic, do we have 8,000 square feet that's not really kicking it in the rest of the year, or do we really know? I mean,
no, because the same things that those 8,000 square feet would accomplish in the summer would mean they could accomplish it during the rest of the year. Would we still be able to have a story time or a children's program concurrent with an adult program in the new facility? Yes.
more to the point, is it needed in the rest of the year? I mean, that's kind of, you know what I mean? There's for the amount of traffic that we're talking about. Like summertime programs, like everybody, you know, a lot of times people go to the Magician, right? Where nobody could fill a room, you know, fit in the room.
So the children's programs are definitely much more attended in the summer, but adult programs don't really get that much of attendance during the summer. You know, we brought in several authors this summer. We had different presentations, and we canceled some of them because there was no one registered, no one expressing interest, and no one coming. That's, you know, contrasts with this past October. We had Antique Button Show with nearly 20 attendees. We had Bald Eagle presentation, which had well over a dozen. So that's just a couple of the ones we had this month. And
Is like well over a dozen? Is that like high traffic for? I don't know library stats. I apologize.
No. For
a dozen does not sound like a ton of people.
Building adult services programs in a community of this size with adults that, you know, people have to take care of their kids to school and you know, after school activities and things like that. So yeah, it is harder to get adults out at night. I mean, how many of you had to rearrange your schedule a little bit to get here tonight?
Another point being made is this year is not a good year because of the construction on Main Street for the last 2 years. People have been avoiding Main Street. We've had a couple of businesses go out of business because of the construction on Main Street. And I know, meeting people all over the town, they totally avoided coming down Main Street because of construction. So anything that happened last year and the year before, it was an anomaly. We made is lesser. So, but some of your questions are very subjective. I think what you're talking about is very subjective, but we feel as the library board of trustees and as the library expansion committee, we looked at the programs. We went through with the state library facility, which did the grant, and if they did, and their guidelines, they utilizing their guidelines, we came up with 24,000 square feet, which would have meant a 12,000 addition. Working with our architects, we were able to reduce that significantly.
I don't think anybody's arguing that. That's not kind of not
No,
my point, though.
that's about program.
I get it. I mean, you guys made some great common sense choices to kind of cut down the scope of the thing. That's not really what I'm asking though.
Yeah, but that has to do with the programs and the programs that the state.
I'm not.
What is your
don't
point?
Get me wrong.
What is your point?
I'm trying to just kind of determine what do we really need.
Well, I think they told us what they.
Point of view. Asking a lot of questions, but
Okay,
say what you want to say.
all right. So as far as from the information I've been given, I feel like this is way more than is really necessary. I really kind of wish that there were like a
So
couple of
vote your
choices.
conscience.
Huh?
So vote your conscience.
Okay, and you can do the same, man. Come on. I'm just saying, it feels like we need like a lowball this and something in the middle, which is the realistic thing that we need.
If I may interject, the Finance Committee did ask us to look at several different scenarios, and we went back to our architectural firm who came up with 2 different scenarios, 2 different footprints, what it would look like inside. I do not have them with me this evening, but they are attached to council minutes, so you could go and look them up. One of them was deemed by the building committee to not meet the service needs because it changed drastically the sizes. In order to maintain the firewall, it changed the size of the rooms that we could add on, so for the community room, to not increasing any space whatsoever. And the other one drastically reduced our sight lines, which is a safety issue for both staff and the patrons and the public of our community.
I think we have some other people that want to speak, so if you have any other summary you want to say, please do so.
All right, so one last thing is like, what do you?
I just want to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but one last thing, and it was said earlier, and we have to reemphasize that we will lose the $1 million grant if we reduce this beyond what the state library would already said. We already had to argue going from 12,000 to 8,000. So going too much smaller, we would probably lose the $1 million state grant. So that's part of the formula that has to be looked at.
We've been here already with the $1 million loss once already. You still got that one, huh?
Okay, we have the next person here. If you could give your name and address, please.
Bill Bonney, 2632 Main Street. I'm on the library building committee. I stepped up here because he's asking some questions, and we're all talking about this square footage, that square footage. The library gets somewhere around 1,200 to 1,300 people walking through the door on a weekly basis. The real question is, when you walk into the library, there's a row of computers. It's right next to the stack. Right behind it is a 3D printer. If you're working on the computers, and the 3D printer goes off, you start getting a little bit of noise. The teens are working over in one little corner, relatively close to the stack. They need more space. You get to the community room down in the basement. It has changed somewhere between 3 to 5 times a day just for the usage. The library people have to go down there, strip it all out, take the tables, do something else with it because it's getting a very high usage. The children's area is very crowded. You can go down there anytime you want, and there's a number of kids running around doing this, playing here, getting books. The library gets a lot of use. It is too small for our community. It needs to be increased. And it's just by the use that we have. Thank you.
Thanks. You want to speak?
Bill Hoffman, 950 Main Street. I was on the last building committee 30 years ago. It was a fun time for all. We had to go back and forth for referendum after referendum, and every time we did, the building got smaller and smaller and smaller. If the referendum had passed the first time, we wouldn't be here tonight because the building would already be there. We had to settle for a smaller building than we needed. However, having said that, we never had any idea that the amount of business that the library conducts was going to increase the way it has. The library was always busy. It's insane now. I mean, I live right down the street. I can see the parking lot when I go by. It's really, really busy. Lots of people are using it. It is not a waste of time, energy, money, or space. When a new family moves to Coventry, they check on several things. They check on schools. They may check on churches. And they check to see what kind of a library we have. Because believe it or not, even in a digital age, libraries are still important. And I think that we need to pass this referendum and have the library. I'm sorry that you had to reduce the size. It should have been 12,000 square feet of an addition. Because that way it'll be there for another 50 years. We had planned on 30 years ago a 50-year addition. Well, we came up short by 20 years because we kept on cheapening down the building and making it smaller. And here we're stuck. We need to have a bigger library. The people in town deserve it. The kids in town especially deserve it. It's a safe place. It's a good place for them. They're well supervised. And for the most part, they're well behaved. I mean, as best a 12-year-old can behave. And I do have some experience working with 12-year-olds. Seriously, this is a good deal. The $1 million grant, which we'll lose if we continue to fiddle around with it. Construction costs, I doubt, are going down. They don't usually. Material costs aren't going to go down. They tend to not go down ever. If you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? And how much more is it going to cost? Just because we sat around and said, oh, do we really need it? Well, I would say for one, yeah, we really do need it. And I think that if you're interested in the future of the town, I've been here for 70 years, and I am interested in the future of the town. It's a good investment. It's going to be a good payback on your dollar in terms of the improvement, the attitudes, and the environment for the kids, the little children, and even some of us seniors. When I drove the senior van, one of the things that I did was I had to drop seniors off at the library to use the computer. I'd go back in an hour and a half and pick them up again and re-deliver them home. So yes, everybody uses the library. And if you don't, you're missing a wonderful experience. I'm going to support the referendum, and I hope the vast majority of the town does also. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Please give us your name and address.
Kathleen Brightonwisher, and I live at 61 Barber Drive. Just a couple things. There's 4 people in my family. It's my husband and I, and I'm a 9-year-old, 3-year-old, and we only have 1 library card. So I think the 64% might be conservative because that's not accurate in our case.
You know, you said in your presentation that there's no more room for new books, that every time you get a new book, you guys have to take one out. And that doesn't enrich anybody's learning. I think the more books you can put in there, the better off we are, so you need more space. And I know that you're not building for the next 5 years. I think very much like you said back there, we're building for the next 20 years and hopefully longer. So you don't need a smaller building. I'm all for a bigger building, and I want more books in there, and I don't want books taken away. I want you guys to be able to put more in there for my kids and for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Come on up.
Hi, I'll keep it quick. I'm Lisa Rylant from 64 Adelma Drive. And just to bring back around the entire presentation of tonight, we've been talking about how the school systems here are improving. They've improved over the last 10 years. We have lots of young families moving in, lots of new families moving in, which means lots more kids. So even if we look at how many people are coming to the library today, that number is going to grow over the next 10 years, 20 years. And as the school systems keep going up, as it looks like they are, that number is just going to keep getting bigger. And so we need a library for all of these people, all of these kids, all these adults. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure, come on up. Give your name and address again, that would be good.
I'm Robin Gallagher, 984 Main Street. I actually have a background as a CPA, so I want to talk briefly to the numbers. I know there were some numbers mentioned and some concern about what this is going to cost. And I think we need to consider that if we're going to start from scratch and look at something that's smaller, perhaps, which I don't think is feasible, you almost have to start with that at a cost of $2 million. You've got the $430,000 or so CIP costs, which need to be expended even if we don't do anything with the library. Then you have the $1 million grant we'll lose, and then you've got the $500,000 grant that's pending that I don't know the terms of that grant, but that might be at risk too. So if you look at a new option, draw up a separate option for a smaller expansion, you're starting with a cost of $2 million as compared to this one. Then how much money are you actually going to save to get what is admittedly an inferior space? So I think that's just a consideration that people have to think about when they look at the total price tag. What is the actual comparative price tag of something else, if you admit that we need something else, and you start at the $2 million? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. Okay, there's a couple quick things I have to say before we can end up. The question to be voted on the adjourned town meeting is as follows. Shall the resolution entitled Resolution Appropriating $5,400,000 for the planning, design, renovation, construction, reconstruction, and improvements to the Booth and Dimick Memorial Library, and authorizing the issuance of $5,400,000 of bonds of the town to meet said appropriation, and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purposes, as introduced and read at a special town meeting held November 28th, 2017 be approved. The ballot label for such questions shall read as follows. Shall the resolution making an appropriation of $5,400,000 for the planning, design, renovation, construction, reconstruction, and improvements to the Booth and Dimick Memorial Library be approved? Yes or no? Items 2 and 6 that we talked about in the call to the meeting will be submitted to the legal voters of the town for a vote on paper ballots on Tuesday, November 28th, 2017, during the hours of 6 o'clock a.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That voting will take place in the polling places established in voting districts 1 and 2. The firehouse. And that the voters entitled to vote by reason of Section 7.6 of the General Statutes of Connecticut, revised to January 1st, 2017, may vote at the Central Firehouse. So those are folks who are on property but are not residents. Absentee ballots will be available at the town office of the town clerk as provided by law, and I guess that's going to be Monday. So I thereby order the town manager and the town clerk to prepare, post, and publish a proper notice with respect to the voting at that said adjourned annual town meeting to be held on November 28, 2017. This meeting is adjourned.